regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad to be on the program today. We're going to be talking with Minnesota Gun Owners Law Center head Rob Doar here in just a moment, continuing the conversation about the shooting of Alex Pretti in Minneapolis over the weekend, as well as, what's weird is like there shouldn't be a debate over what the law says, but there's been a lot of debate over what Minnesota law says, as well as I think, a more understandable debate about practices, right? Not what the law dictates, but what is maybe wise to do when you are carrying a firearm. Anyways, a great conversation with Rob. Before we get started, though, we should also note that, legislative sessions are underway all across the country. In New Mexico, we talked with Zach Ford from the New Mexico Shooting Sports Association. It's a 30-day budget session. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham is pushing very hard for a semi-auto ban. As far as I know, a bill has been written, but the last time I checked, this was like 2 days ago, so maybe it's changed since then. There was no bill number that had been assigned. It had not started moving yet, but no matter where you live, even if you think you live in a safe red state or you unfortunately live in a deep blue state where maybe you feel like your voice doesn't matter, it is really important to stay engaged and involved right now. And I would encourage you, to join your local or state level Second Amendment organization, sign up for their legislative alerts, and keep up with what's going on. I can tell you in Virginia, where I live, things are moving very quickly. We had Senate Bill 749, which passed out of the Senate Courts of Justice Committee yesterday. This is the semi-auto and magazine ban bill. It has been modified pretty extensively, not for the better. They did remove that weird language that under 21s couldn't possess so-called assault firearms. And the definition of an assault firearm was basically, the features-based test that had a manufacture date of before July 1st, 2026. And there was this weird provision where, let's say your AR-15 that you purchased, in 2016, that wouldn't be an assault firearm unless your 19-year-old son or daughter was holding it, in which case it would magically become an assault firearm. And then when you took it back, poof, it's legal again. That weird language has been removed, probably because it was completely unworkable. Now there is a grandfather clause for existing arms that are defined as assault firearms, which, again, it's basically any semi-automatic centerfire rifle and pistol with a fixed capacity of more than 10 rounds, or a semi-automatic centerfire rifle or pistol with that's capable of taking a detachable magazine and has one of a number of cosmetic features. At the moment, possession of those items are grandfathered in. If you legally possess one now, you'll legally be able to keep it after the bill takes effect. That does not hold for magazines, however. Senate Bill 749 has been amended to essentially mirror the magazine ban in California, right? So Virginians who lawfully possess these magazines today would either have to modify them so that they could not accept more than 10 rounds. They'd have to turn them over to police. They'd have to move them out of state, do something to get rid of them, because you would not be allowed to possess them. It would be a Class 1 misdemeanor, punishable by up to 12 months in jail and/or a $2,500 fine. This, I think, is the wake-up call that Virginia gun owners needed. I fear it's too late, but the VCDL, the Virginia Citizens Defense League, says that there are a couple of counties that are looking at reaffirming their status as Second Amendment sanctuaries in the next week or two. There are gun owners who are showing up at county supervisors meetings, asking them to do the same. So I do think that we will see a resurgence in Second Amendment sanctuary language here in the weeks to come. But I would encourage Virginia gun owners, don't just talk to your county supervisors, talk to your county sheriff, talk to your Commonwealth's attorney. That's an elected position as well. And, encourage them to take a public stand that, listen, we're not going to be enforcing any laws that infringe on the Second Amendment rights of gun owners. If the Virginia State Police want to make arrests for somebody carrying a 17-round magazine, nothing we can do to stop it. But here in X County, we're not going to be going after gun owners like that. All right. So with that in mind, let's turn our attention to today's conversation with Rob Doar from the Minnesota Gun Owners Law Center. Lots to talk about. Take a look and a listen. Rob, thanks so much for joining me on the program. I really appreciate it. I know that you must be incredibly busy right now in Minnesota.
Yeah, on top of my regular criminal defense work, you're interview number 26 in the past 48 or 72 hours. So it's been a run.
Wow. Well, obviously there are a lot of eyes on Minnesota given what happened this weekend. And, there are a couple of areas that I want to talk about, starting with what Minnesota law actually says, because, for folks who've been following the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus on X, and you should be if you're not already, you've had to push back against a lot of people who are, pulling up AI slop, basically, and asserting that there are laws that do not actually exist in Minnesota.
Yeah, I joke around that AI kind of launches people to the apex of the Dunning-Kruger curve at light speed. They get a little bit of information and they've got utmost confidence in it. And it is just not true. I mean, one of the biggest things that's been going around is you can't carry at a protest. There's nothing in Minnesota statute that restricts that. If some people point to a riot statute that says if you have a gun, but that's a riot is something very specific, and you actually have to be an active participant. Merely being present isn't sufficient, our case law says. And there's nothing in federal law either. And then there's the he didn't have his ID. That one's real interesting because the statute does require you to have your ID and your carry permit on you when you're carrying, but failure to do so is not a crime. It's not illegal. What it is they give you a $25 citation, and that citation has to be dismissed if you are able to produce those documents. So there's nothing in the law that says you can't carry if you don't have your ID. If you're in that circumstance, the law provides a remedy for that provides no criminal offense.
Okay. It's basically like driving without proof of insurance. You've got insurance, but you don't have your insurance card on you. You show that card later. Look, I did have valid insurance at the time. Citation gets dismissed.
And in reality, in actual practice, this never gets cited because an officer isn't going to just sit there and say, if you tell them, oh, I have my carry permit, it's like, oh, cool. Just, bring it by the station later. That's not something that happens. They just go over to their computer and look it up and see if you actually do have a carry permit.
Well, and it's kind of a moot point because
no one asked for ID
at that moment, right? And the officers involved here did not know that he did not have his permit on at the time. And under Minnesota law, again, you have to provide this proof to a Minnesota peace officer. Are Border Patrol agents considered Minnesota peace officers under state statute?
No, the Minnesota statute for the definition of peace officer that covers its use in 624-714, our permit to carry law, is specific to state licensed peace officers. So there's no obligation to inform your an agent that you're carrying, and even under Minnesota law, you only have to answer honestly if asked. There's no duty to inform here, and then if they ask for it, you're under no obligation to show it. Now, in a practical sense, you might save yourself some headache by doing so, but there's no legal obligation to do so.
Okay, yeah, and a lot of this comes down to what's maybe smart, maybe what's wise to do, what's easier to do versus what you are required to do, right?
Yeah, just because something's legal doesn't mean it's always the smart thing to do.
Yeah, and that's a judgment call. I think that to make about whether Alex Pretti should have been carrying his firearm that day if he intended or there, even if he didn't intend, but if there was a risk of him, not just peacefully standing by and filming, right?
But also Minneapolis is Minneapolis. If I'm going down there, I'm strapped, and it has nothing to do with my activities. It's I don't want to get carjacked on my way to or from wherever I'm going, whether it's to a concert, a comedy show, or a restaurant, or a protest. People don't have to choose between exercising their First Amendment rights or their Second Amendment rights, but everybody can make their own analysis as to their risk assessment about whether they want to do that.
Oh, and everybody is, Rob. Everybody's making their own assessments right now.
Yeah.
So it does sound like there's going to be both a investigation within a Border Patrol, DHS, and from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like part of the agreement that may have been reached between President Trump and Governor Walz is that the state will be allowed to conduct an investigation as well, or be able to be provided that evidence so that they can take part in investigation.
That's the rumor. I hope it comes to fruition. I'm never satisfied when an agency is investigating itself because more often than not, I see that they find that they did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Having an outside look that's from an investigator that has no vested interest in the organization that's being accused of the wrongdoing or an officer of that organization is always good. In Minnesota, when there's a department that uses deadly force, that's reviewed by the State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. It's not done by just the officer's supervisor because we want that extra layer of transparency and accountability. I'm just a little bit skeptical because in federal court yesterday there was a temporary restraining order that was being argued to order the feds to not destroy or alter, render forensically unavailable for analysis the evidence from Alex Pretti's shooting, and the government was resisting that order. So I do hope that there's cooperation, but at least right now on the legal front, that hasn't manifested.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Now, the other angle of this, or one of the other angles to this, is that we almost saw this sort of bizarro reversal of positions, right? We had a number of administration officials say or suggest that there was, something wrong about carrying two magazines, that there was something wrong or illegal about carrying in a protest. Meanwhile, we had people like Governor Gavin Newsom, who actually signed a bill into law that bans carrying at protests and public assemblies, claim that position means that you don't believe in the Second Amendment. What have Minnesota officials been saying in terms of the right to keep and bear arms in relation to this shooting?
Yeah, it is interesting. We've always been vocal when we are defending the rights of gun owners, and we've done so with Philando Castile, with Amir Locke. People, got upset about that as well. But our position is clear: is that the Second Amendment's for everybody. It doesn't care about your politics. Everybody can exercise that right. I do feel like there's intellectual dishonesty on both sides, both from people who want to Monday morning quarterback somebody's Second Amendment decisions. Look, I'm not here to tell anybody not when to carry and when not to carry. If you have the right to do it, you have the right to do it. It's not my position to tell you what to do. And I see some hypocrisy from that side, but also from the other side. I got text messages from some state representatives who are Democrats from my time lobbying at the Capitol, who are like, "Are you guys coming out with a statement? This is an infringement on his Second Amendment rights." I'm like, spare me. You don't give a crap about his Second Amendment rights. You just want to try to leverage this for political messaging. So I do see that there's some intellectual dishonesty happening on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, which I think is why, ultimately, I've been really pleased to see the reaction of Second Amendment groups, which I think has been consistent. I don't think you've seen I'm not aware of any groups that have come out and sort of flipped their position or say, well, the Second Amendment only applies in some circumstances. In fact, from where I sit, it may be that the Second Amendment community is perhaps the most consistent voice in all of this.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that as a Second Amendment supporter. And I'm not going to ask you to weigh in on whether or not you thought this was a good shoot or a bad shoot. Obviously, again, the investigation is going on. We've all seen videos. We've also seen, unfortunately, like AI manipulated videos. There's the image that's been going around of the headless Border Patrol agent. And I would just caution people to keep an open mind at this point. You know what you know, or at least you know what you think you know. But there's also, as Donald Rumsfeld said, those unknown unknowns still out there. But looking at what so far, do you think it's an easy call one way or the other?
No, I mean, there really needs to be more information provided. I think, everybody's free to speculate based off of what they see. You can draw your conclusions. I never say this is absolute right now because we just simply don't have all the evidence. There's always something that can come out that could change the analysis. So I think, you can look at it, you can believe your eyes, but also be open to new information. In this particular situation, it's entirely possible that an officer made a mistake. One of the agents made a mistake in their assessment about whether Alex Pretti posed a threat of deadly force. That's the threshold that needs to be met. He needs to have posed an immediate threat of death or great bodily harm to somebody there. And if there can be mistakes, and there can be reasonable mistakes, and reasonable mistakes, like, I saw an empty holster and I assumed that he had a gun in his hand. That could be something that would be a reasonable mistake, should this go to court. And so that's possible. But then there's also, that analysis of, we expect more out of our officers. So the analysis is always, what would a reasonable officer, a person who is in that situation with the facts that were available to them, with the training and expertise that we expect of an officer, what would they have done in that situation? That's the analysis that's going to come down. And ultimately, there's just not enough information to come to that conclusion, and there may never be. And that could be left in the eyes of the public, or if this goes to court, in the eyes of a jury.
So the last thing I want to ask you about, the legislative session gets underway next month in Minnesota. We know that Governor Walz has been calling for a ban on so-called assault weapons in large capacity magazines. We have seen, as you know, I mean, there's the Democratic politicians, I think, who are trying to take advantage of this by suddenly feigning support for the Second Amendment. But I think, on the left, there is, I don't know to what degree, but I think there is, at least to some small degree, a number of people on the left who maybe are rethinking their views on the Second Amendment, maybe more supportive of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of messages from people not politically aligned with us that tell us flat out, I don't agree with everything you stand for, but you have made me rethink the Second Amendment. And some of those people are in response to the government tyranny that they said would never happen. Even Dean Phillips, former representative for the greater Minneapolis suburbs area, said, I often joked about the Second Amendment fans saying that they needed against an oppressive government, but now I get it. Now whether the ICE operations is indicative of the level of tyranny that our founders fought against is going to be open to interpretation, but it is changing the viewpoint on some on the left.
Do you think that will have an impact in the legislative debate this year?
Probably not. I mean, they're going to be pushing for the same things that they always do: assault weapons bans, magazine restrictions,
with exemptions for police, by the way.
Always. Yep. There's always going to be the exemption for police there.
Yeah, we saw that in Virginia yesterday. The Senate's version of their gun and magazine ban bill was heard in committee, and the Pretti shooting was brought up. But again, Democrats basically use that as an excuse to call for a gun and magazine ban that would exempt the law enforcement officers that they were blaming for the shooting. So,
yeah, funny how the facts always seem to shift to support a narrative.
Yeah, isn't it? All right. Well, listen, I don't know when interview number 27 is, but I'm sure it's not long. Rob, thank you again for spending some time with us today. Thanks for all the work that you're doing on behalf of Minnesota gun owners and the Second Amendment there at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, also the Minnesota Gun Owners Law Center. If folks want more information, if they want to, join, if they want to follow what you're doing, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, gunowners.mn's our website. If nothing else, sign up for our email alerts there. We are on Facebook and Twitter as well as at MN Gun Caucus, and I'm at Rob Doar, DOAR. If you wanted to, I tend to get into a little bit more legal nerdery there. So if you want to follow there.
I like the legal nerdery, so keep it up. Rob, thanks again. We'll do this again, hopefully very soon.
Thanks, Kim.
And thanks once again to Rob for joining us on the program. And yeah, hope we get a chance to talk with him again very soon. Now, before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, let's talk about this for a second. From city streets to modern trails, your gear should take you wherever life takes you. That's why at Modern Rugged Leather, every bag is handcrafted from premium, responsibly sourced leather. It's designed to look sharp, last long, and tell a story of its own. Every stitch, every buckle, every strap reflecting timeless craftsmanship and backed by a lifetime warranty. Because quality shouldn't quit when the adventure begins. I got to tell you, we've had not a lot of snow here. We've probably got like 4 inches of snow. It's hard packed. We got this thick crust of ice on top of it right now. And it's been cold this week. So I do this program in my little office that's detached from the house. And I've been every afternoon packing up my gear, going back into the house where it's warmer, and writing the rest of my stories for Bearing Arms. So my Modern Rugged Leather bag has been getting in a lot of work. Hasn't been going very far. this week, but it's been making a lot of trips to and from the home office to the home. And I got to tell you, it's held up well. So whether it's the boardroom or the back roads or even your driveway, snowpacked as it is, Modern Rugged Leather helps you carry confidence every step of the way. Modern Rugged Leather. It's modern style, timeless durability, backed for life. Life takes you places. Make sure your gear keeps up. Shop the full collection and find yours today at modernrugged.com. Again, that's modernrugged.com. And there is a prediction for like another up to 6 inches of snow right now in Central Virginia this weekend. So my Modern Rugged Leather bag's probably going to be getting in a lot of work in the coming days and perhaps even weeks. Hopefully not weeks, but we'll see. All right, on to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. Let's start there with a disturbing case out of Chicago, where a nearly fatal attack on a Chicago Transit Authority train ends with 0 prison time for the assailant. Now remember, CTA property, gun-free zone, weapons-free zone, right? That is being challenged in a case called Schoenthal versus Raoul, which the Supreme Court will be considering conference later this year. A district court judge in Illinois said, yeah, this violates the Constitution, at least as it applied to the individual plaintiffs in this case. Seventh Circuit reversed that decision, said, oh, no. Illinois can ban concealed carry on public transit. Chicago Transit Authority can ban guns from their property because these are crowded places where vulnerable populations like kids may exist. And so therefore, you can ban lawful concealed carry there. Now, if that's the standard, think of all of the places in this country where our right to bear arms could be negated. That is an absurd standard. In fact, the Supreme Court said in Bruin that the state of New York or the city of New York could not declare the island of Manhattan to be a gun-free zone simply because it was crowded and generally protected by law enforcement. Yeah, that's essentially the same argument that the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals used to uphold Illinois' ban on concealed carry on public transportation, as well as the CTA's edict that concealed carry holders not welcome to bring their lawfully carried firearms on board these trains. Meanwhile, I've lost track of how many crimes, violent crimes, we've talked about on CTA property just over the past few months. You had the woman who was set on fire, right? We've had shootings, we've had robberies. In this case, Jesus Ramirez, he's 45 years old. According to prosecutors, he and a 37-year-old man from Cicero, Illinois, crossed paths on a Pink Line train. This was April 2024. Words were exchanged. The situation turned physical. Investigators say that Ramirez ended up kicking and punching the victim repeatedly in the face and body, continuing the assault even after the man was lying motionless on the floor of the train. According to CWB Chicago, the victim suffered catastrophic injuries. He was in a coma for about a week. He was hospitalized for about 2 months with a scattered brain bleed, traumatic brain injury, broken ribs, a temporal bone fracture, ear damage, a fractured nasal bone. As CWB Chicago reports, in an early court appearance, Judge Ankur Srivastava described the incident, stating that Ramirez, quote, nearly beat the victim to death. And yet, Jesus Ramirez got a 2-year sentence on Monday. And after receiving credit for more than a year that he spent on electronic monitoring, not even behind bars, but just a year with an ankle monitor strapped to his body, he got credit for time served, even though he wasn't serving any time. And his sentence was further reduced under Illinois law, which means he will not go to prison at all. He was initially detained in the Cook County Jail. Judge Tyria Walton released him on an ankle monitor about 3 months after he was arrested. And by the time he pleaded guilty to aggravated battery on Monday, he had accrued 581 days of credit, which is more than enough to offset the prison time that the judge handed down, according to court records. So there you go. You can beat a man nearly to death, and your punishment is to wear an ankle monitor for a couple of years. And that's it in Illinois. Now, even without this case, I think that it is a violation of our right to keep and bear arms to deprive lawful concealed carry holders from the ability to defend themselves on CTA property. But when you add in cases like this, it becomes even more unconscionable that the state of Illinois, Chicago Transit Authority, still defending a statute and a policy that tells people you have no means of protection other than your fists and feet. And if it's somebody bigger than you, somebody stronger than you, multiple assailants, you're out of luck. And no, you can't depend on justice being served, because Illinois Democrats have made a mockery of the idea of justice for the victims of violent crime. I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do with Schoenfeld versus Rowell, but I know what they should do, because this law in Illinois is putting people at risk. Clearly, this weapons-free policy doesn't stop violence from occurring on CTA property. It just stops people from being able to fight back effectively. Now, speaking of self-defense, let's actually stay in the city of Chicago, where a concealed carry holder shot an attempted robber on the northwest side of the city. This report comes from Fox 32 in Chicago. Happened about 2:45 this morning, so not a whole lot of details yet. Corner of Montana Street and Laramie Avenue in the Cragen neighborhood of Chicago. Police say the 39-year-old armed citizen was getting out of his vehicle when two guys approached him. One of them pulled a gun, demanded the man's belongings. Police said the victim, again, licensed concealed carry holder, drew his own firearm, fired multiple shots, striking one of the suspects in the legs. Believe it or not, the other suspect apparently stuck around, did not run away, as so commonly happens. So officers were able to take both suspects into custody at the scene. The wounded suspect, a 23-year-old man treated by paramedics and taken to a local hospital where he was at last listed in good condition. Detectives still investigating, but again, at this point, seems to be pretty evident this was a justifiable shooting. Two guys come at you with a gun. You have a reasonable fear that your life's in danger, and you have a right to defend yourself under those circumstances. But we will keep our eyes open for any more details as they become available. And finally, today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Some neighbors in Wagner, Oklahoma, who helped save their disabled neighbor from a house fire. And kind of a sad commentary. This guy says he's been in the house for decades. He didn't even know the neighbors who came to his aid. Sad, but we maybe don't talk to our neighbors as much as we should. Irvin Howerton was cooking lunch on January 24th. He left the kitchen, went to watch some TV, and the squash that he was cooking actually caught fire. Maybe some grease involved there. He tried to put the fire out himself, but he realized that he was running out of time. As Channel 6 in Tulsa, Oklahoma reports, Howerton said, I got my wheelchair, and I finally got it in there, and then I got my fire extinguisher, and it wouldn't work. Howerton did make it out of the house as his home was going up in flames. But he said, the lady that lives across the street, I was trying to get to them and they had the door closed. I guess they couldn't hear me. Hannah Hayner was in her car with her kids and an exchange student who's staying with her family when she heard screaming. And she saw the smoke and flames. She said, I ran up to the porch and I saw Mr. Howerton sitting on kind of the edge of the porch. So at that point, he had gotten out of the building itself. But again, he's in a wheelchair. He's not safely away from the flames at that point. She said he was trying to get down the ramp. She said all I could really see was his face because there was so much smoke everywhere. So Hannah ran towards the fire. She saw that Irvin Howerton was stuck on that porch ramp, and she was able to rescue him. She said, I'm telling you, if it had been a minute longer, I don't think we'd be sitting here today. Even Mr. Howerton's dog was rescued. Her kids apparently able to grab the pup and keep him from running back inside the house. Hayner said that the dog was still in the fence. They were trying to get back to the house, and her daughter Lily said, hey, we need to save the dog. And she said, my exchange student, who doesn't even like dogs, decided to jump the fence and get the dog and save the dog. So good work by the Hayners, young and old, adult and child, I should say, in saving Irwin Howerton. He lives alone, uses a wheelchair. Again, he can't stay with his family due to mobility issues. Right now, he's in a hotel. But Hayner and her family didn't just help save Howerton's life. They're now helping to rebuild his life. They put together a donation drive to get him, sweatpants, sweatshirts, everything. Just the replacements of the necessities that were lost in this fire. So, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, not just in that moment, but in the days after. Hannah Hayner and her family, We thank you for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company, and I do want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. I would encourage you to check out bearingarms.com throughout the day today, keeping up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Trying to get a hold of a Virginia lawmaker to talk about what's going on here with House Bill 749. This is just one, by the way, of about a half dozen gun control bills that were adopted or at least approved by the Senate Courts of Justice Committee. Dozens of gun control bills filed in Virginia. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that in greater detail on tomorrow's program. But if not, there's always more news impacting our right to keep and bear arms to discuss, and we'll bring it to you. In the meantime, have a great 2A Tuesday. I'll be joining Carl Higby on Newsmax in the 6 p.m. Eastern hour tonight. You can join that. And otherwise, we'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.